Welcome. This is the October 14th meetup of the PCR, NMRA-PCR Coast Division. We have a really kind of a very specific set of topics today. The first thing I wanted to let everyone know, next week and in 2 weeks, the LocoFi folks will be here and they're going to do an update on LocoFi. They've included now Steam Sound and some other capabilities. So they're going to go over that. I know we've had some members that have been very interested in LocoFi. Then I wanted to go through real quickly where we are on the convention with clinics and layouts, and then just go to the Coast Share. So what I want to do is bring up this. This is basically the website for the hang on, am I sharing or I stopped sharing? Did I ever share? I think I shared. This is the website for the convention. And if you go up at the top, you'll notice that under attractions, you've got layout tours, clinics, operating sessions, etc. If you click on clinics, what you'll see is that we have some clinics that have been proposed. There are only about 6 up there now. We have about 4 or 5 more that we need to go through and get up there. But I think in the next couple of weeks, we'll be up to probably about 15. If you're interested in doing a clinic, it'd be great to get your clinics proposed early, is you just click on this button here. So go to the website, go to attractions, or if you want on the home page, all you really need to do is scroll down the whole page and you'll come down to the tab on clinics. You can click there and go to that clinic page. If you on that page click on propose a 2024 convention clinic, you come to this page. So there are 2 different ways to propose a clinic, the preferred way and the not preferred way. So the preferred way is to use this online form, or you can download a PDF and fill out a PDF. The online form, what you do is if you click on that, you immediately go to a form and you just fill that out. So you enter your name, your other information, some information about your clinic. You know, what's the description of your clinic? What's the title? We have 2 kinds of clinic slots. There are 1-hour slots and there are 45-minute slots. So if you've got a clinic that's a shorter topic clinic, go ahead and sign up for the 45-minute slots. There are 2 of those in the evening every day. Then you kind of put the topic for your clinic, because we're going to kind of put that, when we put the final register together of clinics, we'll have it sorted by these topics. Your AV needs, et cetera, presentation format. The in-room computers will probably only do PowerPoint and PDF. So, that'll be kind of your decision there of, if you've got an Apple, we'll have to figure out how to connect your Mac up and use your Mac. A few questions on if you're using your own computer, what operating system you're using, etc. Are you willing to participate in a post-clinic breakout session, Q&A session following your presentation? This would probably be for the virtual convention. A little bit about room setup. So basically, you just kind of go through this and answer the questions, and then that gives us all the data we need to be able to have you do the clinic. Go back here one. So if you want, the other thing you can do is you can download the PDF form, and it's the same thing in the PDF form that you just print out, fill out, and then mail back in. So if you prefer to do it this way, it's the same data, it's just a different format. Is that easy to understand how to propose a clinic? Any questions, thoughts? So layout tours are exactly the same. So if you have a layout, what we're doing with the layout tours, just so you understand how it's going to work, is each layout tour will be listed on the main page of the convention main page. So each one of these is a layout. They're just an alpha by last name listing. So if you said I want to have my layout be open, we'll put you here. And then for each one of these, If you click on it, there's a page for that layout with more information, more pictures, a link to a video if there's a video link, that kind of thing. So, what we're trying to do is make it really clear to people so they can look at the layouts and say, oh, I really want to see that one. Oh, I really want to see that one. It's easy to understand at this level. It's not just a list of names. You actually get a little bit of pictures and stuff, and then you can get a little bit more detail on the layout. When we get to the convention, we'll have a packet for everyone that'll go out, that'll be about the layout tours, that'll have them laid out. One of the things we're doing with layouts is we're going to try to lay them out very much around specific locations. And so, what you'll do is, for example, there'll be a South Coast trip afternoon. There'll be maybe a north side of the East Bay, up in the Berkeley area, up that way, Berkeley, Oakland, the peninsula. So we'll kind of have it. They'll be on specific days. There'll be probably every day 2 tours, and there'll be different directions. So the idea is you drive out and there'll be 5 or 6 layouts open, and you can see those and then come back in the afternoon, because every day in the schedule you'll get about 6.5 hours. I'll show you the schedule in a moment if you haven't seen it. So if you want your layout to be open, it's exactly the same process. Is you can do your layout using an online data entry form, and this is the same exact kind of form. You just put in your name, your address, your city. I don't know why we put country in, but that was good for clinics. It really doesn't matter for layouts. Then there are questions like, what's your layout access? You can choose. These are actually, it's not a multiple choice. It's a list, so you can choose multiple ones if you want. Parking availability. And what you saw is, if you go back and look at the website, what you saw on the website is that, go back here to, on each one of these, when you go into the page, that information that we put there comes right from that form. So, what's the access issues? What's the parking? And this is the kind of stuff that, how big is the layout? What's the era? Bench work, track work, scenery. Is this a highly detailed layout? Is it a work in progress? So that'll all be here so people can use it to understand which one they want to go to. So again, if you have a layout, go ahead and submit your layout here. Once you do that, we'll get you up and get you on the website, etc. So the only last thing I wanted to cover was just so everyone understood, for both clinics and layout tours, the way this is going to work for the schedule is that we'll have, inbound layout tours and outbound layout tours that are out of the area. But every day from 12:15 to 6:30, we're not going to have clinics. The clinics will be in the morning and in the evenings. And then during this time frame, during the day, we'll have layout tours, operating sessions, prototype tours, and we may have some extended large clinics, like 3 or 4 hour clinics, if we can figure out someone to take over doing some of those things. So that's kind of it. So, again, if you're thinking about doing a clinic, great time to get online and get it proposed. If there's a topic, for example, you're building a model and you would like to do a clinic about how you built this model, go ahead and propose it now, and then you've got the next 6 months, 8 months to put your clinic together, finish the model, and put your clinic together. If you got your layout, definitely get your layout in. The earlier you get it in, the more we get it up on the website so people can see it. Any questions, comments, suggestions? By the way, I really open to suggestions from everyone on how we're doing this. One of the things we're trying to do really hard is to automate some of the processes of running a convention, to make it easier on the volunteers. So, because it's hard. And by the way, if anyone is interested in participating and being part of the convention, just send me an email, let me know, send me a text, I'll contact you. There are opportunities. For example, David Gibbons is doing clinics. He needs someone to work with him and help him with clinics. We're definitely, by the way, we're still looking for someone to do non-rail. If you're interested in driving a prototype tour, we've got discussions underway fairly well with Ardenwood and Jack Burgess at Ardenwood. We really need someone to engage heavily with Niles Canyon. And we have a guy at BART who we've been starting a conversation with. But it'd be great to have someone to volunteer to take one of those on and say, hey, I'll take on going to Niles Canyon and working with Niles Canyon to set up the prototype tour at Niles Canyon. There's kind of some very specific things that need to get done, and we don't really have enough volunteers to do it. So my perennial request for volunteers. Anyway, that was kind of all I had today. So I guess we'll throw it to share and tell about modeling. I can let everybody know I'll put a link to it. I went down to the California Central Coast event last weekend, and I actually did a recording of the model railroad that's in the San Luis Obispo Model Railroad Museum. And I did a gimbal iPhone recording. I put that up as a YouTube video. I'll put a link to it in the chat if anybody's interested. It's in some ways it's a great soporific because it's a fairly long layout, and the gimbal iPhone thing makes it kind of feel like you're on a drone tour of the layout. So, anybody have anything else interesting, exciting?
I'm working on a square foot module or a square foot project.
All right, square foot, or a random shaped square foot.
Square foot.
Cool.
So I have a removable building that goes on my module. It's a milk shed. It's held in place with magnets. And so I decided that I could just put a piece of homosode on top of some, a square piece of foam, and see if I could do some modeling that I hadn't done yet on the bigger module, and just sort of do something small for fun.
Cool. Yeah, that should be interesting next year. The square foot module going as Earl said, the 144 square inches with no side smaller than 4 inches, so you can actually do a square foot that's not square, but is randomly shaped. So it lets people do some new, maybe interesting thought process. We'll see how that works for a year.
Well, square was good for me, and
square's good, and it's interesting. And the ones that I've seen that are really interesting, I thought it might be interesting too, is the business card ones. The idea of building an O-scale model on a business card.
I saw the one in that was the lobster trap where the entire base was in water.
Yeah,
that was I thought that won an award some year. I thought that.
Well, that was the national. That was in Spokane at the or Tacoma at the NNG. Yep.
Yeah, I didn't see it in person, but I thought that was way out there. So I'm not doing anything quite that fancy.
So we got through everything kind of interesting and very quickly today. So again, if you weren't here earlier, the Loco-Fi guys, he will be here next Saturday. They've introduced a new version of Loco-Fi that includes steam sounds and I think some other functionality. So he's going to be here to talk about that. And I was kind of thinking about if there's interest in this. One thing that has been a lot of interest on the recently on the New Tracks program has been the question of doing battery powered or wireless locomotives. Is that something that's of interest to folks generally?
Yeah.
Yeah, because and I'll be really frank. I'm seriously thinking about whether I'm going to build a layout or use my modules in a layout. And with building a layout, one of the big things is then you got to build the electrical. And I've been having this thought that says, well, gee, maybe the right answer is to not do an electrical layout, but rather do a dead rail layout and do it with battery. The other one that I was thinking might see if he would come talk to us. Hopefully, get a few more folks to show up for it. Would be George Bogota. I can't remember his last name from Soundtracks, because the Blue Nami is another interesting option for doing dead rail. The other thing is one of the guys on New Tracks actually has been doing dead rail for ON30 locomotives by buying $30 RC race cars and pulling the chipset out of the car, the battery and the little board out of the car, disconnecting that from the motor of the car, connected to the motor of the locomotive. Now you only get 3.7 volts if you buy the cheap ones, but what you do is you get a 3.7 volt output, which will run most ON30 locomotives to a fairly reasonable speed. And you can do the whole conversion to wireless for about $35. So no sound, obviously. But so I don't know if it'd be interesting to have a few programs on that kind of thing for us to do, if that would be kind of an interesting area to focus on.
Yeah, I think so.
So cool. I'll see if we can get that set up so we can have a few of those. We'll start with the local file. We'll see if we can get George to come in and talk about, the Soundtracks, the Blue Nami, and then maybe have some other folks talk about just kind of dead rail in general.
Yeah. So you had enough with DCC in Pleasanton to fulfill your life?
Well, it's not that. It's just, here's the thing is, it's not the wire. It's the fact that for every turnout, you've got to do one of two things. You've either got to physically provide a way to switch the power to the frog, which means if you use ground throws, you now have to use ground throws with a switch, or you have to have some sort of switch thrown off with a turnout or something like that. So that's option one, is all your turnouts have to be wired. Now, if you use a tortoise, obviously you get that on a tortoise. But if you don't want to use tortoises, you just want to use ground throws because you think that's a lot easier, then that's an issue.
Cheaper.
And then the next option is, okay, if I use a ground throw, then I can use a frog juicer. There's a really interesting argument that the frog juicer causes microarcing and creates issues because you actually have a short for a moment, and then it's detecting the short and switching the power to the frog. And so, one of the interesting things is that the dead rail kind of kills that. And if you got to put a decoder in your locomotive, so, most of the locomotives I have are Bachmann, and most of them are DCC enabled, but they're not sound. They have a basic 4-function decoder in them. If you're going to pull the 4-function decoder out and you're going to replace it with a decoder, the question is, what's the additional cost of the battery and the associated circuits with that? If you want to charge off the track, because to me, nirvana is you have a locomotive that will charge off of 12 volts DC on the track, but has a battery to run it when there's no 12 volt DC on the track. And now what you can do is take some of your mainline tracks and your yard tracks, just connect them to 12 volt DC. And when those locomotives in that area, it's charging. When it's not in that area, it's not charging. So it stays charged.
Block detection.
I don't care about, I'm narrow gauge. I don't care about block detection.
Yeah.
I mean, so
do you think that'll work? Do you think that'll work in my ON30 Heisler, in my Bachmann? See, that's my acid test.
Well, a lot of those. So when you get to something really small, like a porter, you have to put an attendant car. You have to put you're almost going to have to put, some sort of a service car, like a little tank car behind it or something like that, and have an umbilical cable over to the engine. And that's what, by the way, that's what Steve Sherrill does with these circuit boards he takes out of the race cars, out of the RC powered cars, is, the circuit board's about this big and the battery's about this big. So you got those two components. Is he just puts them in a little tender car behind and then just runs the wires up to the locomotive to run the motor. And in fact, what he does is he makes the locomotive so it plugs into the tender car. So he's got multiple locomotives that can plug into the same tender car when he wants to run them. So, those are all considerations. One of the considerations for me is that the area that what I'm probably going to model won't have a lot of logging engines. It'll be just a lot more basic rod engines. I mean, it's kind of like the South Pacific Coast. They didn't have, some of the logging operations had that, but I probably wouldn't even be modeling those. Probably be more modeling the main line of the SPC, which doesn't have, that kind of engines. It was all just rod engines. And I think there's plenty of room in a 440, a Bachmann 440 tender to put that in.
Yeah,
I don't know.
The North Pacific Coast is a rod engine thing, but I have a soft spot in my heart for Heislers.
These I understand. But again, so I'm kind of looking at it from a cost perspective of saying, well, if you've got 7 or 8 locomotives or 10 locomotives, and the cost per locomotive to add the battery power versus just a standard decoder is $50 or $70 or whatever the number is, that's going to be for 10 engines, $700. But then out of that, you eliminate all the costs of wiring and you eliminate all the costs of DCC because everything is now run through Bluetooth. And you just, and by the way, you don't have to worry about NMRA or anything like that because all of your programming is done over Bluetooth from your phone. Your database for your locomotives and everything is your phone. It's an interesting juxtaposition with the traditional way of doing things where you got all these builds, but you go this different way, and all those things kind of, once you get past this barrier, all come kind of automatically.
Anyway. I've been working on an ABA F7 set. I'm using Loco-Fi, which is Wi-Fi, not Bluetooth.
Yep.
And I've often thought that because the second A and the B are a dummy, let's put the batteries in there.
Yep.
That works. The other thing is putting the Loco-Fi in a steam engine, and I got one of their new units, and I'm ready to install it. But unfortunately, I've had a lot of difficulties lately and haven't got around to that project.
Yep. But no, I think it's just an interesting thought process. I've thought that Blue Nami was this really interesting product that, if you're, and I don't know what percentages, but my expectation is there's 30 to 40% of model railroaders, active model railroaders that have a DC layout. It's somebody who got into the hobby years ago, built a layout, it's DC. They've got a whole bunch of DC engines, and the cost structure of going to DCC and being able to run, because it's kind of one of those things of saying, well, if you go have DC and DCC, then when you turn DCC on, only the 2 or 3 engines you have that are DCC will run until you converted all your engines. The cost of that's huge. But the interesting thing with Blue Nami is you can just leave your layout DC, or by the way, Loco-Fi. It doesn't matter, either one of them. You just leave your layout DCC or DC, just get power from the tracks, and then run the control stuff wirelessly. And now you can pick your 3 or 4 favorite locomotives, have sound in them, have the remote control to them, be able to run them anywhere on the layout while still keeping the layout with the 2-cab DC system for DC locomotives if you want to run them.
I've noticed that more and more things are both Blue Nami and Loco-Fi have a micro capacitor built in.
Yep.
At least will get you through a frog.
Yep. Well, and you
Um,
can put a keep alive on them, or you can put like battery power on them. So
and Rapido's newest 44 tonners also have a capacitor that comes in the locomotive with it.
yep, that's not just for sound. Because I know like
For power.
the soundtracks ones have a capacitor that comes with them, but it's wired only on the sound circuit. So it was kind of their thought process was, if you've got a traditional, most locomotives have some sort of a flywheel, and the flywheel will get the locomotive from a power perspective over a piece of dirty track. So the locomotive's running along, hits dirty track, the power drops, but the flywheel continues to move it forward. It gets to clean track and it takes off again. So from you may get a little hesitation, but the locomotive will keep running. The problem is when that dropout happens, the sound circuit recycles. And if the locomotive's got like a startup cycle, when you turn it on, it'll go through the full startup cycle. So what they did was they put a little capacitor just on the sound circuit that's just designed to keep the sound circuit alive through a short power burst. It's different than the keep alive, which is on the motor circuit and the sound circuit.
Well, what I'm talking about is the Loco-Fi unit actually has the keep eye on the power.
On the power, they've done it on the track power too. They put a big enough keep
And the
alive
Blue Nami is now coming with that too. And as I said, Rapido's new HO 44 tonners have a device that sounds like a capacitor in them.
Yep.
From the factory.
They probably put a keep alive in the unit by itself.
Yeah, they put the keep alive in the unit itself.
Yep. No, it's and so
New
again, I think
things are
that,
happening.
Well, maybe the Heisler only needs a small super cap instead of a battery. If there's power on rails except for the turnouts, just say I don't want to have power anywhere around my turnouts because I have a frog problem. But if I provide power on the rails and I use that to charge the super cap, and
right.
then the super cap drifts it over the turnouts because that's too far for a flywheel to go.
Right. Well, I think if you've got, that's an interesting question. I'm sure if you took a Blue Nami with a keep alive, you could get across it. But I don't know that you get a Blue Nami and a keep alive and a Heisler.
But a battery is so much better because then I could take my battery equipped locomotive to your layout and just run it.
Well, the beauty of the Blue Nami, and I don't know, I got to go back and look at the Loco-Fi to understand if the Loco-Fi is kind of the same way. But the beauty of the Blue Nami is it will operate on basically anything up to 16 volts, and I don't know how low it'll go. So it'll operate on DCC, on 16 volt AC, or on 12 volt DC. So basically, its power circuit will take any of those in and power the decoder. So you can, so the nice thing about that, about if you've done that right, is you can take your locomotive to a DC layout and just say turn the DC up and run it off the DC. Or you can take it to somebody's DCC layout and you can run it yourself from your phone, and it's not using their DCC system. So as long as you're connected to it with your phone, it's only using the track for power. Now, what you can do is also connect it to a battery. What I have not found personally is a cheap circuit board that goes between the track. On one side, on the bottom, it's got the track. On one side, it's got the battery. On the other side, it's got the decoder. And so it actually will manage charging the battery, giving power from the battery, the decoder. If there's no track power, using the track power and charging the battery and the decoder, kind of a hybrid car kind of controller, but in a little chip, a single component to put in a locomotive. I think if you had that, it'd make life pretty interesting, because then you could have the best of all worlds, a locomotive that would charge itself as long as it was on any powered track. It would charge the battery and then it would run on the layout off the battery, even if there wasn't power.
It's been a long a long argument on model railroad hobbyist forums about this. A
Yep.
very long thread.
So
And
Steve Hayes
they've
had
explored just about everything.
Steve Hayes, who recently died, had a HO scale. I think it was an RDC or a doodle bug or something like that, that did exactly what Phil's talking about. He had the track set up to charge it in one station when it was doing a station stop, and he would run it
Wow.
with no track power the rest of the way. It was pretty cool. I don't know how he did it. He might have explained it on the video we shot at his layout.
There's a circuit there. There's actually, they sell a little charge controller. You can buy a little charge controller online, you know, for the batteries for the RC guys. And it's just figuring out kind of how you take the track power, run it through a rectifier and provide it in. If you're not worried about having DCC coming from the track, I think it's actually pretty easy. You just take a rectifier and you have that battery charge circuit there, and you put a clamp on it, put a rectifier, put a clamp, put some sort of a clamp on it, and then run the battery off of it.
Yeah, but if you can do 16 volts AC, you can take the DCC and rectify it. You don't care about the controls.
Right. That's what I'm saying. If you don't care about the controls, if you're just going to do all your controls through the Bluetooth,
Yeah.
or the Wi-Fi with Locofi.
Yeah,
I think
my layout has DCC power on it.
Right.
And that's all the power that we need for the Locofi.
Right.
It's just, you know, I've got a few switch engines that I don't know how I'm going to cram a receiver in, and diesel engines, of course. But the other stuff, the steamers all have tenders, so there's plenty of space there.
Yep.
This
So
is
anyway,
HO, of course.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to we'll try to see if we can have some conversations about it after. We'll start next week with Locofi and see if we can, if anyone knows anyone that'd be a good person to come talk about that, just send an email to them and to me and say, hey,
In our group, what's his name? Manufactures electronic components.
so you're talking Seth Newman?
Yeah, Seth. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that he does much on
Seth
battery
made
stuff.
me Seth was marketing a capacitor for a while.
He made the Keep Alive. He made a Keep Alive based on the discussions we had in one of these things. But I don't know that he does much on the dead rail stuff.
He could.
But anyway, I may put a call out for it too. I'm gonna put something together for our meeting 2 weeks from now about the fact that Locofi is coming when I send that out, and in that I'll put a kind of request. Hey, if anyone's is up on doing dead rail and wants to talk about dead rail, we're gonna have a dead rail meeting for the next one after that. 2 weeks after that. So 2 weeks from now will be Locofi. 2 weeks after that will be a general dead rail discussion.
Locofi for years has been promising a capacitor to work or a system to work with their stuff, but haven't produced it yet.
Yeah, I think he's kind of overwhelmed by trying to just get to the next level of his base product. But by the way, guys, my son is dropping off our dogs and their dog. We've been trading dogs while we've been traveling. And so when he shows up, I'm going to jump off and go see him, and then I'll come back. So,
well, I got to take off, but I really like the discussion about dead rail. It really made me think, and I like the idea of potentially charging from the track. It's going to make me go look at my Heisler and think about this, because with my rod locomotive, I have a 260 and a 460, and an 0130. There's plenty of space for whatever I want to do.
Yep.
For those. So
yeah, the tenders on the rod locomotives in ON30 are great. I mean, HO, you're a little bit smaller on it, but ON30 is pretty good for that.
Yeah, great call. Hey, thanks a lot, guys.
Have a good one.
I'm even experimenting with a brass tender to see if the Locofi unit will pick up inside a brass tender.
Well, I have to say my dream with the Locofi is that they add a video port on it. I mean, to me, that would be very interesting. The
Yeah.
idea, if you could plug in, if you had a plug where you could plug in one of those drone cameras and just plug a drone camera into Locofy, and then on the app on a tablet, get a cab view, I think they'd have a killer product. But yeah, I think that's another challenge for him.
Well, um, I think, I've always dreamed that I could do this. And when I built the little layout that I have, I planned on having all the turnouts flipped manually. Originally, I thought I was going to be able to do the tube and knob under the layout, but that's sort of gone by the way. And I've come up with just a long stick with a piece of rubber on the end to make it nice and easy on the turnout to flip the ones that I can't reach directly.
Well, I should give you, I did a thing for a 3D printed turnout throw that is on the front panel, and it's a slider switch. You slide up and down to throw the turnout, but it requires a lot of work to install it. That's why, the ground throws are really easy, or if they're spring loaded turnouts, just throwing the turnouts with the spring loading makes it really easy.
Yeah, if you use Payco turnouts, they've all got a spring.
Yep.
So that it makes it easier that you don't have to worry about holding the turnout over.
Yep.
And you can use in NHO, I'm using the Central Valley switch throw target that are scale, and they're just dummy, but that's great.
Yep.
They really look great. And after all, that's what I'm modeling for.
Nice.
Oh,
I just sent an email to George Bogatuk, Phil. He'll
cool.
He'll probably respond.
Yeah, he's
pretty
always
quickly.
been kind of interested in doing it. So
he's the perfect person to talk about Blue Nami. I mean, the guy knows
oh yeah,
everything about soundtracks, everything. And that's the one that I would really recommend if you manage to get him to come on to let everybody know, because he's a great resource when it comes to ideas of how to fine tune that type of application with dead rail, especially.
Yep. Well, I think they've really hit a unique market spot with that right now. Those in the they and the Locofy guys, and clearly the Blue Nami, the Tsunami side has, I'll say, a richer operational sound and control structure.
Yeah, they have more functions and they have soundtrack sound, which is, kind of a cut above. I know Piyush as well, and I really like what they've done. Something else kind of exciting about the Soundtracks product right now is they just recently came out with the app for Androids.
For Android, yep.
Yeah, before it was only an Apple control. Now it's Android. Of course, if you wanted to contrast that with the Locofy, they are still only on Android. So if you're an iPhone user, you can't really use theirs. But Androids are cheap. You can get an Android phone for $50 or something.
Well, the way to think about all of this is an iPhone SE. It's a 2020 version, the Gen 2 version. And I'm looking at getting a new iPhone because this one's getting a little weird. They'll give me, I think, $60 for this as a trade-in. That's a $60 cab. What cab can you buy for $60?
Well, you're going to have something in your pocket when you upgrade to your new iPhone too. So
right, but what I'm saying is, just if you want a cab for guests, versus going and buying an NCE cab or an MRC cab that costs $120, $150, or a TSC Wi-Fi cab. Just have some old phones, build a rack where you've got some plugs and you can plug them in. And when a guest comes, you take the phone, you clear everything off of it, but just run Wi-Fi and run the app. and the Wii Throttle app or the Android app, depending on which ones you have. And when people come in, they just get an old phone, and that's what they use to control locomotives. And the beauty is, if you do that, you don't have any control system. You have no central hardware. You have none of that.
Yeah.
I mean, it depending on the size of your layout and how many locomotives you have, and et cetera, et cetera. It's an interesting option, and I don't think it's been very well detailed yet. And there's some people that are really doing it. I think somebody said Steve Rediker's been doing it for years on his ON30 layout. It'd be great. I should see if we get Steve to come talk about his experience. By the way, a lot of the dead rail was kind of the previous round of dead rail equipment. This kind of integration of the wireless directly into the decoder that Locofi and Bluenami have done, I think, is really the next generation of how this is going to come together.
The Bluenami makes it so easy. I mean, it's just you're attaching a decoder like any other decoder.
Right.
And it's so easy to use. I mean, it's like having JMRI in your computer because you can change all of your variables right on your phone. I mean, I did an install video on a Bluenami right when they first came out. It was into an HO scale model. And I couldn't believe how easy everything was. And now I'm in the process of doing an install into a garden scale 2-truck Climax. And it is so easy and it sounds awesome. I mean, the sound files are really good.
Did I play that? Let me play a video I don't think I played this video here. Let me play one video. Let me go find a video here. Here it is.
I have my Climax sitting off camera here close enough that if anybody would like to see and hear what it sounds like, it doesn't move yet because we're working on some of the gear issues. It's an old Bachmann, which they all have gear issues, but it does turn on and it does make all the sounds, and it's pretty amazing. I'd be happy to go grab it and turn on my webcam in case you want to see it.
Just 2 seconds, and let me do this, and then you can go grab that and do that. That'd be great. Here, let me. So that was a Tsunami 2 4-amp decoder with 4 speakers, 2 in the front, in the front panels, right behind the cab, and 2 in the back. The front ones are facing out to the side, and the back ones are up and down. Those box cube speakers. But yeah, when you hear it in person, what's impressive, what's so amazing about it is you got the speakers distributed in the engine, is when you hear it from the sound and the horn plays, the horn sounds like it's playing in the middle. But when it runs by you, the sound changes because the speakers, even though they're playing the same sounds because they're oriented different, they sound slightly different. So as it goes by, it actually sounds like there are different kinds of sounds coming out of the locomotive at different places. Yeah, John, do you have yours? That'd be great. I mean, this is what's cool, is you can get such really neat sounds out of these things.
John will be back in a second. He just had to run and get something.
He's going to get his locomotive.
Yeah, hold on.
If anybody's interested, I've got a whole bunch of garden rail stuff that I'm going to let go for very low prices, including an original Bachmann Shea. That's in 20.3 scale, F scale.
I'm putting my fingers in my ears. There were a lot of really nice garden railways down in fact, there were more garden railways open down south than there were regular layouts.
Oh,
Okay, so
yeah.
as you can see, it's here. I gotta remember how I
Yep.
turned this thing on. There's a switch somewhere. Oh, here it is. So I don't know if the sound canceling stuff on Zoom will allow us to hear this, but
It should.
it's on now. Can you hear it? Well, there's also a bunch of noise going on. Can you hear it kind of making its noises?
No.
So I'm just gonna, I don't know if I can make this work here. Doing it backwards. I'm just gonna go into my Blue Nami. Yeah. And it just takes a second for the Blue Nami to say, oh, there's a Blue Nami within range here. Can you guys see this?
Yep.
And it shows up right here. So if I go to standard control, hold on a sec. I can't see what, oh,
You gotta pick the engine. You gotta select the engine and then do standard control.
it's collecting the data out of, there it is. It's that simple. And
So hit the horn there. Hit the horn on it. So we hear the horn. Yeah, see, now we can hear it.
then if you know it has all of your typical things, I can turn the light on and off. You
That's
can't
okay.
see
That's okay.
yeah. But the cool thing about this is if I hit this gear down here, it brings up all the settings. And I mean all of the settings. This is everything you could, I'm gonna try to,
It's
everything
okay. Yeah, so you can
possibly-
change it's all the things you get in JMRI, but it's all done right there.
It is.
Right.
Every single setting that you could possibly want to change is right here. Now, the one thing LocoFi does that this doesn't do, which is probably the main benefit to LocoFi, is you can enter your own sounds on LocoFi.
Right.
The only problem with that is how many of us, let me turn this off. How many of us are actually sound engineers that could make something like that really work? Probably not most of us. So,
The only advantage I've seen I can think about to having your own sound files, because I'm not going to go out and do a better sound recording of a 280 engine than Soundtracks is going to do with their equipment, or and by the way, or any of the other guys, not just Soundtracks. Be the same thing for any of the other decoder manufacturers that do it, the Lock Sound. Or the only thing I was thinking is that if you wanted to record some unique things, like in either in a locomotive, an announcement, or for example in a sound car where you wanted to put some sounds in it, especially if you wanted somebody to be able to say something. I always thought it'd be fun to have your locomotive have a button you could key and have it say very loudly, "Please keep your hands off the layout," as the locomotive went by. For in the modular stuff where people touch the layout, you could actually use your locomotive to tell them not to. That would be fun to have as a CV. But
I actually worked with one of the wave files from LocoFi. I wanted to see if I could take off a Southern Pacific
I'll be right
6
back.
chime whistle
mhm.
and put it on their LocoFi. So this is still with the old diesel. So it was, instead of the horn, it actually had an SP 6 chime whistle. And it actually, there's some cheap software that you can use, at least on PC or iMac, that you can use to cut and loop sound.
Yep.
And even I could do it.
Yep. It does require some time though to learn what you're doing. I'm not saying it's terribly hard, but personally, I don't think most people would go through the trouble to learn what they need to do in order to do that. But
Well,
maybe I'm wrong.
I'm looking for someone to start selling sounds.
Yeah, I have a startup sequence from, I think it's trying to remember now what
I
engine.
mean,
they-
you're just selling the WAV file clips.
Yeah. I sent it to Piyush and I said, here, use it if you want. And he says, oh, you can add that to our library. And I lost interest because I don't, I'm not in on their forums and all that stuff. So I'm kind of like, oh, I don't have time to learn how to sell this. So I was just like, just do what you want with it, Piyush. It's fine. I don't know if he did anything with it. I think it was for a SD9 or GP9 or 7. I just don't remember which engine they were running, but I was there at Sunol riding Niles Canyon Railway because, I volunteer there, and they were going to start up the engine. So I'm like, oh, I'll just record this and send it to Piyush because I told him I have, horn recordings. I have startup sequences from all kinds of, from a couple, at least EMDs that he could use. And I think he isn't really in the sound business as much as, it's easier for him just to say, here, you go put it up there. And I have so much other stuff I'm trying to do. I just don't have time to do that.
Well, to tell you the truth, it only took me a couple of hours to figure out what to do with a WAV file,
Yep.
to cut it and loop it.
Yeah. I mean, I work with sound all the time. To me, it's really easy. I just know that most people that don't have the time or don't want to, mess around with it won't. So it's kind of a great feature that a lot of people won't use.
Yeah.
It's too bad because I think Locofy is onto something really cool.
Yeah, particularly also with the fact that you can use the micro card to do firmware upgrades to the receiver.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember, Ken, but I think I was one of the first people ever on YouTube to show Locofy. I did an install about 4 or 5 years ago of their original first ever released module. And
I watched your video, John.
Yeah. So, I've been on it, onto their stuff for quite some time, and they're really great. Piyush is just a great guy too. I really have enjoyed all my interactions with him. So I hope they're able to get that off the ground. When the Blunami came out, I was just really floored though. It's like, wow, all the sounds are there. No one has to deal with any of that sound stuff. Because to be honest, I was not really impressed. And I mentioned this on the video I did when I installed that Locofy, that I didn't think the sounds were that great that come with it,
Blunami came in with a slightly different configuration, where they were putting the receiver between an existing DCC setup and allowing you to control that without using the rails.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, with this battery power, if you could manage to fit it into whatever your model is, I mean, the Blunami is really a complete solution out of the box. I mean, considering you can control it now with either phone.
The nice thing is I can have a Blunami locomotive as well as a Locofy, and they can work on the same layout.
Yes. Yeah. And if they're dead, you can do the dead rail application with Locofy too, as you know. So I'm really excited about the future of dead rail. What both companies are doing is pretty groundbreaking. And I'll always be what's the word for it? Happy for Locofy because they were the first ones. Well, I guess Blue Rail really was the first one to do the wireless.
Well, Blue Rail came out first, but they sort of aborted.
Yeah, it's a great concept, though. I'm going to go stick this Climax back in the garage. I'll be right back.
Otherwise, I think that some of the Blue Rail technology was taken over by Hornby in England and used to set up their own proprietary sound system.
Sorry, Ken, I missed what you said. Do you think the Blue Rail was taken over by what?
I think Hornby in England, the Monster
okay.
Railroad Company. Well,
Oh,
they have
I
a
didn't know
sound
that.
system, and I think that they took some of the Blue Rail technology, licensed it or whatever, to build a proprietary system for their own locomotives.
I didn't know that. I think that Blue Nami is based off of their infrastructure as well.
Yeah, Blue
Uh,
Nami is also based off it, but I think it's
Uh,
licensing deals. You know how licensing goes in the
well, so Blue Nami,
electronics world.
Blue Nami was Blue Rail. Oh, so Blue Rail was the guys who built that technology.
Right.
And what they did was they built basically two components. They had the Bluetooth chip, and that was set up where they could send CVs to it and from a phone app.
Mhm.
And then they also had a power management part of the circuit that would basically abstract the DC signals out of the power and provide the DC signals to the power, and mix the power and the DC signals to the decoder. So you could have a decoder there that was powered from them. What they did was took those pieces of technology and put them directly in the decoder. And so what Soundtracks did was they did an exclusive joint venture relationship with Blue Rail to do Blue Nami, and by the way, Soundtrack said it is exclusive. So they got access to the Blue Rail chipset to put into their coder, and they sell it, and then they're selling it with the application. So I'm assuming that Blue Rail is getting some of the revenue from every Blue Nami decoder.
I'm sure that, I've been sure that he wouldn't talk about whatever, he might not even know the financial aspects of whatever deal they made with
Right.
Blue Rail, but I'm sure George can tell us if he comes on, and he'll be able to tell us everything about the technology, because that's really his bag of stuff.
Exactly. The one thing, and I talked to George about this, actually made a suggestion of how to do it, but the one problem right now with Blue Nami is there's no security. So, if you're at a show and you've got a locomotive sitting on a siding that's powered, that's got a Blue Nami chipset in it, and it's not connected to anything, you can control it through the rails using DCC. But if somebody walks up and they've got the Blue Nami app on their phone, and your engine's advertising itself, they can just pick your engine up and run it, because there's no security on the Bluetooth.
Yeah,
Now,
that's something we'd have to ask George about, but I'm pretty sure if your phone is connected, or a phone is connected to it, it will not show itself as available.
Once you're connected, it doesn't show itself as available. Yeah, I talked to George about it. I mean, what I suggested to him was they put in a CV that was a security CV that you could set and lock it to a specific phone, because you've got the same code for that CV, and then you could basically turn that off only through the rails DC. See, but they've got to figure out if they want to do that. I mean, like I said, the only downside is if you're at a show, if you're out in a public event and the locomotive's sitting there and there's somebody who knows what they're doing and has the app on their phone.
Yeah. It's probably something that would never, hardly ever happen. So they may not even be worried about it.
Well, the Great Train Show is coming up, and I've got the app on my phone.
Are you going to go screw around?
No, just walk around and see what you see. I mean, it's just an interesting question, right? So, so it's kind of, I'll tell you my story about this because it's kind of an interesting story. So back in the late 90s, we got At Home. If you remember At Home, it was the first cable internet access. I mean, you had dial-up modems, and all of a sudden you could get it over your cable with At Home. And I got At Home, and it was great. All of a sudden, we went from this slow speed stuff to this reasonable speed stuff, and it was wonderful. And we went to Hawaii for a week, and we came home, and I walked in my office, and my hard drive was just hammering. It was back in the days where you could hear your hard drive going, you could actually hear the hard drive, and my hard drive was just hammering away in my PC. And I went in to figure out what in the heck was going on, because I hadn't been there for a week. It shouldn't have been doing anything. And I found I had an application running that was serving files up on the internet with my computer running as a server. And I went and I pulled the files up, and surprises, they were of the adult content variety. And so what I figured out was I had been hacked and somebody was using me as a server for images on the internet. And so I pulled out my sniffer, which is the thing you use on Ethernet, because it turned out At Home was basically an Ethernet network with a bunch of houses on the end with no security whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so I got on it and I started sniffing it and I started seeing all the packets for all my neighbors and they were all in the clear. And I started just went and sniffed it and I picked up and I looked at where all my neighbors went. And then we had our 4th of July party. And it was quite interesting to be able to tell you, by the way, just saw that you went to these 3 websites, because it turned out there was no security. You could just snip on the cable and literally you could see everything your neighbors were doing on the internet, all the data in the clear. So,
Wow. What could
so
possibly
yeah, so it's
go
kind
wrong?
the Blue Nami thing kind of strikes me as the same way that you have to be really careful what you put out in public, because whilst you may not necessarily have bad people doing it, there are people that may just do it for fun. But
Wow.
yeah, anyway, I think they'll come up with something, like I said, something where you've got a way to, once you're connected to it, to be able to turn on a security function where you create a link lock between your phone and that specific decoder, and that you can only stop that link lock from the phone that linked to it. So once you've linked to it with a phone, it'll stay linked to that phone until you actually tell it no, it can be open again for other phones.
That would require decoders to have a unique ID.
Not really. You can actually work it really simply. You just create a CV, and the CVs are typically 255 bits. So you create a CV, and what happens is that's the security CV, and you have an app on the phone that if you're connected to a decoder and you run the lock app to lock that decoder to the phone, when you click that, the phone generates a random number within the 255 bits. It sends that to the decoder and says, store this in that security block. Then what happens is when you go to try to connect to that, when the decoder's advertising on Bluetooth, I'm here. When a phone tries to connect, the first thing that the decoder does is says, I'm in security mode, send me the code. The phone sends down the code. If it's the phone that knows it, it'll send down the right code. If it's not the right phone, it won't send the right code. So you can't link up. So once you've done that, you just use a 255 5-bit security code. And quite frankly, for this app, that's enough, because you'd have to go hack the app to actually change it, to try to, generate the codes to try to fake it out. You'd have to actually hack the app that they built to be able to do that. And I don't think anybody's going to do it. It's too much work. So it's a pretty simple security mechanism. Just requires one CV to link the two together.
Well, it would seem like a good thing to have. I mean, even if just for the advertising value.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I basically tried to explain I told George that have somebody call me if he wanted to. I explained to him how you could do it, because the thing is, you can't do normal Bluetooth security, which is pairing, because that requires a lot of intelligence to work with the Bluetooth chipset, and that there's no intelligence connection in between the Blu-rail chipset and the decoder. So what I was trying to do is just do something you could totally do just in the decoder with a little bit of software in the decoder. And it's the kind of software they know how to write. So, well, we will see. I'm sure they have lots of stuff on their plate of software work. That's the other challenge, right? Is anything like that has to go into the priority queue against all the other things that people want to do.
And it's amazing. We've still got 8 people listening to this discussion.
I was about to take off, guys. It was nice to see you.
Yeah,
again.
I think I'm gonna call it too, guys. My son dropped off the dogs, and I need to take care of the dogs before they go crazy. And it's been fun discussion, a good discussion. I think the wireless / dead rail discussion is great. And propose a clinic. Have your layout open. Want to get more stuff up on the website. That's one of the real goals now, is get enough up on that people really start getting interested in what we have. I was quite disturbed because I was at a meeting where the MER was talking about their convention next year, and they said they already had 40 clinics signed up for their convention next year. And so I was quite taken aback by that. We need to get going.
It would be a smart idea to let people know if there's going to be a virtual too, because
Well,
if
we will.
if people are like me, they either fill their calendar up with what they can do or they block it out with stuff they can't
Yep.
do. And if they don't know it's happening, they're going to block out that time with other stuff. So,
Yep.
it's what
I
happened in
agree.
Sacramento.
Yep. Well, we're gonna make that, the promoting it. Like I said, all we've got to do is close on exactly what we're doing. Here's what's going to be virtual and here's the cost, and then we'll get it promoted. I want to get that done in the next month. Get her going quickly, because people will start putting their calendars together for next year and the next 6 months, next 2 or 3 months.
Start off just saying it's one room for $20.
Yep.
I'm out, guys. See ya.
Cool. Thanks, John. Talk to you guys later. Have a great one.